This episode is brought to you by NordPass.
And hearing you talk about it now, it's obviously still very, very raw.
Yes, it is, and it definitely is very, very difficult, especially in the beginning, the first year. There would be times when I would finish a seminar and shake and be physically sick. Of course, there are physical traumas from something like this, and it is difficult, but what the reward is that children come up to me afterwards and say to me, "Thank you so much for helping me. I'm going to go and check my friends list on the computer now." Or when we get a call from parents saying, "You really influenced my child's behaviour on the internet. I can't thank you enough."
This case takes us to South Australia, to the quiet town of Stirling in Adelaide, home to around 2,500 residents. One of those residents was 14-year-old Carly Ryan, who lived there with her mother Sonia and her younger brother. Carly and Sonia were the absolute best of friends and had an incredibly tight bond. Sonia said she was very young when she had Carly and was a single mother struggling to make ends meet, and that Carly had saved her life and given her a purpose. She described Carly as really funny, full of energy and life, and always the entertainer in the house. Her daughter loved having her own style and flair and enjoyed expressing herself through her makeup and clothes. Her friends said she was full of kindness and always an open-hearted person. As Carly entered her teenage years, her friendship groups began to change, and a group of new friends she had made were described as a bit more experimental than Carly. On one occasion, Carly got alcohol poisoning and was admitted to hospital. As soon as she was better and back at home, she told her mother how this had scared her, and it pushed her to make the decision to distance herself from this specific circle of people. Following this, she began looking for more friends, and the new and emerging social media platforms seemed like a great way to do this. Back in 2005, social media and social networking was still very much in its infancy. It was a new age of exciting things that had never been possible before, being able to meet and talk to people online, all over the world, at any time of the day. And it wasn't long before Carly joined the relatively new MySpace. MySpace fast became the largest social networking site in the world, holding the title for several years. At one point it was the most visited website in the world, surpassing even Google. She also joined Vampire Freaks, which started as a social networking site, and then a clothing outlet as well. Carly would often tell her mum about the new friends she was making online and how excited she was to be talking to so many different people. One of those people was a 17-year-old called Brandon Kane. He went by the username Corrupt Koala and was an aspiring rock musician living in Melbourne with his dad. Carly fell fast and hard for Brandon, and Sonia said whenever she spoke about him, she was gushing. However, Sonia did notice the age difference between her young teenage daughter and Brandon, and kept an eye on their interactions as best she could. But Sonia said every time she looked over Carly's shoulder and saw a conversation between them, everything seemed, for want of a better word, normal. The teens would talk about everything from music to travelling to their hopes and dreams for the future. Brandon started talking to Carly's friends too, and they were all initially excited to see this potential romance blossoming for their friend. Carly and Brandon eventually began a long-distance romantic relationship, talking all hours of the day and night. As Sonia began to warm to the idea of the pair's feelings for each other, Brandon's dad, Shane, also took an interest in the couple too. Shane would often comment and interact with posts the pair would make back and forth, and it seemed that he was approving of the young couple too. Sonia said that Carly definitely felt a gap in her life having grown up without her father, and that Shane seemed to be helping to fill that void. Carly was busy planning her 15th birthday party and invited Brandon to come to her house and celebrate. Although the pair had still not met in person and this would be the perfect time, Brandon called Carly and said that he was sorry, but he wasn't able to make it. Carly was crushed, but seemed to perk up when Brandon made a suggestion. He said his dad Shane would be passing by on a work trip and would love to come and meet everyone on Brandon's behalf. Shane worked in security and his job would often take him around to different parts of various cities. Carly came bounding into the kitchen, handing the phone to her mom, saying that Shane was on the end of the line and he wanted to introduce himself. Shane said to Sonia he would love to drop off a present for Carly from Brandon and finally meet the family of the girl his son was so crazy about. Sonia, although hesitant, agreed. As they had all been talking for so long online, it didn't feel like a stranger, it felt like an old friend. On the evening of Carly's party, Shane arrived at her home to meet her and her family. He was in his security uniform and even showed his ID badge to Sonia before he came in. Sonia said he was polite and keen to talk to everyone. She said Carly was beaming to finally be able to meet her boyfriend's dad and get to know Brandon a bit more through the man that seemed to know him best. Shane gave Carly the gift from Brandon, which later turned out to include some underwear and a nurse's outfit. Shane was attached to Carly all night and was behaving in a strange and seemingly possessive way, but Carly remained calm. She valued her boyfriend's dad's opinion and wanted him to like her and her friends and family. As the night drew to a close, Shane said he was going to leave and get a hotel room. Sonia told him not to be silly and he could stay in the spare room, having travelled so far to get there and spent a lot of money doing it. Early the next morning, Sonia was up and getting ready. As she walked past Carly's room, she saw Shane asleep on Carly's bed, fully clothed, on top of the covers, with all of Carly's friends in the same room too. Sonia was horrified and demanded Shane get his things and go. He didn't say a word as he left. He just got in his car and drove off. Sonia said to Carly that she no longer cared how much her daughter liked Brandon. There was something seriously unnerving with his dad's behaviour, and the whole situation felt very wrong. Carly did confess to her mom that Shane had behaved inappropriately towards her that night. But despite this, Carly was devastated at how things had ended, and begged her mom to patch things up with what could potentially be her future father-in-law. But this encounter had unnerved Sonia too much, and after this, she not only cut the internet off and took Carly's phone away, but threatened to call the police. Carly pleaded with her not to, distraught at the thought of not being able to ever see Brandon. Sonia eventually gave Carly her phone back on the condition that any and all communications with Shane ceased. Sonia sent Shane an email saying that if he ever contacted her daughter again, the police would be involved. She was shocked that the email she received back was nasty and vicious, with Shane threatening legal action against her for defamation. He called Sonia pathetic and a gutless bitch, saying that if Carly and Brandon carried on seeing each other, Carly would be moving into their house, and thus Sonia would lose her battle anyway. But before we get any further into our case today, my sister and I wanted to take a short break to thank our sponsor for today's video.
Our sponsor today is NordPass. NordPass is an incredible password manager, easy for everyone to use, and it's brought to you by the same cybersecurity company that built the hugely popular NordVPN. NordPass allows you to save an unlimited amount of passwords and credit and debit card details safely and securely inside an encrypted password vault. NordPass helps you do many things, such as check the health of your passwords, telling you if they are weak, old, or have been reused, generate secure and complex passwords when you need them, and my personal favourite feature is the data breach scanner, which checks to see if any of your passwords or debit or credit card details have been leaked anywhere online. One thing I find really stressful is having to reset passwords when I forget them, but since using NordPass, it's taken the stress away and kept it simple. It gives me peace of mind that everything is staying private and secure. We take cybersecurity really seriously, and elements of this often feature in the cases we cover. While accessing things online has never been easier, it just means it's even more important we take extra precautions where we can. We believe everyone has the right to feel and stay safe on the internet, and NordPass is such an amazing app for helping you do this. With the special Cyber Month deal, you can get 70% off NordPass by visiting nordpass.com/trulycriminal all by using our code TrulyCriminal at the checkout. Plus, you get an additional month completely for free. Once again, thank you NordPass for sponsoring today's video.
Almost a month would pass since the birthday party, and on February 19th, Carly spent the morning with Sonia, painting her nails and getting ready for a sleepover with a friend. Sonia had spoken to her friend's parents over the phone, and the sleepover had been planned for a while. Carly seemed to be back to her usual self and was looking forward to spending the night with her friend. As she was leaving, Sonia said they gave each other 4 huge hugs. Whenever the one let go, the other would pull in for another hug. Carly said, "Love you, Mum," and headed off down the street. Early morning, February 20th. Horseshoe Bay, Port Elliot, 80 kilometres south of Adelaide. South Australia Police received a call, reporting that the body of a young female had been found floating face down in shallow water. A pathologist quickly confirmed that this was definitely no accidental death, and the injuries on her body were consistent with being attacked. Around 9 a.m, Sonia was trying to ring Carly, but her phone was turned off. Her teenage daughter was glued to her phone all hours of the day and night, and alarm bells rang very quickly. As she hung up the phone to try and call again, she received a call from an unknown number. "Is this the home of Carly Ryan? I've just found her purse on the side of the road," the man on the phone said. The location of the purse was a long way away from the place Carly was supposed to have been staying, and she had absolutely no reason to be there. Panic was setting in, and a frantic Sonia rang the home of the friend that was hosting the sleepover. To Sonia's horror, the parents said that Carly hadn't shown up. Sonia called the police straight away. Over the phone, the police informed Sonia that they had just found a body that seemed to match her daughter's description. There was no ID found with or near the body, and so Sonia went to identify the girl, the whole time telling herself it couldn't possibly be her daughter. But she said the minute she saw the nail polish, she knew it was Carly. As word began to spread, Carly's friends would find out by turning on the news and seeing her face on the screen. The community was collectively shattered, and nobody could think of anyone that would want to hurt Carly, let alone kill her. The area of the beach where Carly was found showed signs of a struggle. Her jewellery was broken and scattered around. And police also found the tip of a latex glove and drops of blood on the sand. The autopsy revealed 19 separate injuries, with 6 to 8 of the injuries being blows to the head. Her cause of death was a combination of facial trauma, smothering, and drowning. It also revealed cannabinoids in her blood and beach sand in her esophagus. The police began collecting footage from the cameras outside the surrounding shops, and one camera showed Carly at 7:04 p.m. She was walking down the boardwalk with 2 men. A witness also came forward and described seeing the men that seemed to fit the same description on the beach near to where Carly was found. This was just before 10 p.m. that night. The witness recalled seeing a lone pale blue car in the parking area by the beach as well. Although he couldn't remember the car's number plate, he did remember seeing some sort of security badge with the number 24 on it, and this was in the window by the passenger seat. Neither Sonia nor Carly's friends could give any explanation as to why she ended up on that beach or how she got there. As well as the surveillance footage, police were going through Carly's online interactions with a fine-tooth comb, and the only name that was consistently popping up was Brandon Kane. Amongst lots of messages that showed an infatuation with each other, police also found some odd and out-of-place communication between Brandon and Carly's friends. Emails and messages that, over time, had become increasingly aggressive and nasty. It became clear to detectives that Brandon Kane was extremely manipulative and had been trying to stop her talking to her friends for a long time. The once outgoing and sociable Carly was becoming increasingly isolated from everyone apart from him. Police were not only looking to talk with Brandon, but they also wanted to speak with his father, Shane. As the investigation deepened, Sonia told police about the inappropriate and unnerving incident with Shane at Carly's birthday party. Sonia showed police the email she had sent to him after this happened, and the thread of conversation between the pair. Detectives needed phone companies to identify a couple of numbers that Carly had been talking with frequently. These numbers were traced to Melbourne, and also in Adelaide. Mobile phone data put the two numbers and respective phones en route to Adelaide on the night of Carly's birthday party, but upon looking up the names and addresses linked with those numbers, police quickly determined these details to be fake and had no clue as to who was on the end of the phones. Some of the calls were linked to a small suburb called Walkerville, just miles from Carly's home. There was a caravan park in Walkerville, and police wondered if maybe whoever was on the end of the phone had stayed there at any point. Police got a hit. Two men fitting the same descriptions as the camera footage and driving the same car the witnesses had identified on the beach had in fact stayed at the park in one of the cabins. The vehicle that was with them was registered to an address in Melbourne. Detectives finally had a lead on finding who were now the only two suspects in Carly's murder. When the police arrived at the address, they found the blue car outside with the same security badge in the window that the witness had described. However, the address was not linked to Brandon Kane, and it was not linked to Shane either. It was linked to a 48-year-old father of three, Gary Francis Newman. 11 days after Carly had been killed, police knocked on Gary's door. He was swiftly placed under arrest and didn't say a word to the police. Officers began searching his house, and as they opened the desk drawer, they found pages and pages of names, passwords, and emails. Gary had more than 200 online personas, two of which were both Brandon and Shane. And as police were inside his house, on his computer were other chats open with more teenage girls he had been talking to. He was logged into these chats as none other than Brandon Kane. He had an extensive amount of fake photos and had also used family members and friends' details to help him carefully craft numerous profiles. Police said that because he so often used his family and friends and their information, there often seemed to be something to support these profiles as appearing to be real. It's only when you dug deeper, the truth started to unravel. They also found a camera that had been taken from Carly's house on the night of her birthday party. One of these photos was of Carly and Gary, who she thought was Shane, standing next to each other talking. The security uniform he had come to the Ryans' house in, along with the ID badge, were also completely fake. And the boy seen walking down the boardwalk with them on the day Carly was killed was in fact Gary's 17-year-old son, who is believed had essentially been hired to play the part of Brandon that day, although this remains unconfirmed. The evidence against Gary was irrefutable. On the evening before she was set to go to her friend's sleepover, she had actually made plans with Gary, who told her that he and his fake son Brandon would be in town the following day. Having waited 18 months to meet the person she had fallen in love with, Carly couldn't refuse the offer, and she promised she wouldn't mention it to her mom. After the three met up, Gary drove Carly and his son to Horseshoe Bay, Port Elliot. Based on the evidence, police believe that Carly was violently assaulted by Gary after she had refused his advances. They believe he pinned her down by sitting on her back and pushed her head into the sand, suffocating her. Given Carly's small size and frame, there would have been no way she could have fought him off. It is believed that Carly was unconscious when Gary left her body in the shallow water, clearly hoping she would either float away and never be found, or that it would look like she had accidentally drowned. And it is thought that this whole horrific ordeal was witnessed by Gary's son. What remains unclear, however, is whether his son was involved any more than that, but sand from the beach was found in both Gary and his son's shoes. Forensic experts determined that Carly was alive and fighting for her life for at least 30 minutes on the beach. Almost 3 years after Carly's death, in October 2009, Gary Francis Newman finally appeared in court. Both his and his son's identities were initially not revealed to the public or media. Although the press argued that the public had a right to know who had done this, Gary's identity remained concealed for a long time, and his son's identity remains hidden to this day. Gary asked to plead guilty to manslaughter, but prosecutors would not accept this plea. His now 19-year-old son also entered a plea of not guilty. Throughout the trial, Gary stated that he struggled with bipolar disorder and OCD and was asexual and actually not interested in sex at all. He claimed that he was like a father figure to Carly and that he had only chatted with her through his Shane profile but never Brandon's. He blamed his teenage son for the Brandon Kane profile, saying it was him that made it and was using it to talk to Carly and other girls. However, the prosecution said they believed that the Brandon identity was actually operated by both Gary and his son, either in conjunction or at different times. Gary admitted that he had met up with Carly on the day she died and they did all go to the beach together, but he claimed that they had said their goodbyes and parted ways. He told the jury he had offered Carly a lift home, but she refused, and he and his son left her on the beach that evening. He even went as far to say he hadn't even heard about her death until 3 days later, and following this, he had phoned Crime Stoppers to try and help catch the killer. Gary's son, who had been at the beach that day, testified against his father. He said that while the three of them were sat on the beach, Gary made more advances towards Carly. Carly tried to walk away, but Gary attacked her from behind. Although his son denied having anything to do with directly killing Carly, he did admit to helping Gary cover it all up. One of Gary's other sons also testified against his father. He said that when his dad had returned from Carly's birthday party the same night she first rejected his advances, he was infuriated and angry. He vowed to his sons he would return to Adelaide to fix Carly up. Gary even later bragged to his son about what he had done to Carly on that beach, showing him the bruises on his hands from hitting her. At that time, his son didn't take his father's words seriously, thinking it was all just talk. The jury's deliberations lasted 10.5 hours over 2 days. Many were scared that Gary could walk free. There hadn't been a case like this before in terms of prosecuting someone for a crime which tackled a digital and online issue, and how that would be handled in the courts made people very nervous for the outcome. But the jury came back with a guilty verdict, and Justice Trish Kelly sentenced Gary to a mandatory life sentence with a 29-year non-parole period. Gary's teenage son, who was a minor at the time of the crime, but a witness to the killing of Carly, was cleared of all charges. The courts believed he deserved a second chance, and his identity remains hidden to this day behind a suppression. Justice Kelly said, "Gary Newman deserves a life behind bars for his grossly perverted plan to deceive, seduce, and murder Carly. It was a terribly cruel thing you did to this beautiful, impressionable 15-year-old child. I say child because that's what she was. A child that fell in love with the idea of a handsome, musically inclined, and rather exotic Brandon Kane. The real man was in fact an overweight, balding, middle-aged paedophile. You were obsessed with Carly to the degree that when you couldn't get your own way, you were prepared to kill her." Gary subsequently appealed his conviction on several grounds. One of those was that Sonia should not have been allowed to give evidence at his trial. But after 5 months, this appeal was denied. Carly's case and the extent to which Gary had gone to lure Carly in highlighted the emerging phenomena of grooming, catfishing, and online predatory behaviour. As social media and networking was still so new, the idea of people potentially abusing these platforms and abusing people's trust online was really something that hadn't been thought much about until this time. There really was a lack of understanding about the way in which platforms like this could work and operate in a potentially harmful way. Sonia said, "If I have to live here without my child, I have to do something meaningful. I have to do something to prevent this suffering." And that is exactly what she made it her mission to do. In 2010, the Carly Ryan Foundation was established. This is a certified online safety program provider under the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner, and it delivers online safety and healthy relationship seminars to students and parents.
Sonia Ryan wants to warn of the dangers.
Most kids just don't think it's going to happen to them. They put all their information on their MySpace and Facebook, and they don't think about who could be looking at their information.
To grab the attention of teens, Ms Ryan has spent the past week interstate touring with bands, handing out this internet safety pamphlet to concert goers.
Once they'd read the brochure, came to me and said, "Oh, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for this information, and I'll pass it on to my friends.
So far, 20,000 pamphlets have been distributed, and now sponsors are needed to pay for another printing run. A website will soon be launched.
Sonia Ryan's also giving talks at primary and secondary schools around Adelaide, but her cause could get the ultimate boost. The foundation's approached Oprah Winfrey in the hope she might agree to publicise it when she visits in December.
The organisation provides a range of services and support in the areas of internet safety and crime, cyberbullying, connection to resources and counselling, and contributing to law and policy reform. Sonia Ryan is also a member of the Education and Prevention Working Group with the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation. Her relentless work saw her become a finalist in the 2017 Human Rights Awards, and she is a previous winner of the South Australian of the Year Award for her continued contribution to the community. Carly Ryan was the first known person in Australia to be killed by an online predator, and this prompted some serious legal changes.
Is prevent harm. We want to give police the power to arrest, take DNA, seize technology before a child is harmed, because currently they have to prove sexual purpose.
So the issue there, I suppose, is you can have someone talking online and you have to, I suppose, wonder, and I'm sure this is part of your preachings to politicians, what real reason is there for someone of age, for an example, someone in their 40s, to be lying about their age, talking to someone, but at the moment no action can really be taken, essentially?
Not until they have evidence of that sexual purpose. So yes, there are so many people online, police are dealing with this all the time, pretending to be, a 12-year-old or a 7-year-old child or a teenager, trying to create connection and lure children. This is becoming, unfortunately, a really common crime in this space. And so what we want to do, again, is give police the power to intervene sooner. The current grooming laws basically are saying, we have to have that sexual evidence. So,
after setting up the Carly Ryan Foundation in her daughter's honour, eventually in June 2017, Carly's law would come into effect. This meant that people caught lying about their age online to minors could be prosecuted. In August of the same year, Carly's law was used for the first time when an already convicted paedophile in his 30s was found to be grooming children online, posing as a young woman. An even stricter version of this law was then introduced a year later. The year the law came into effect, a patchwork quilt was hung up in Parliament. It was made out of Carly's favourite pieces of clothing and represented the 10-year fight for a much-needed change in the law. Sonia continues to fight for Carly's name to be remembered and her voice be heard. She hopes that Carly's law will save children from predators online and potentially even save their lives. She said, "I'm sure she's looking down at everything we're doing in her name. It's an incredible legacy for her, and to know she didn't go through that horrendous suffering for nothing. The children will now be saved in her name from terrible harm and suffering. I fought with every breath in my body for Carly's legacy. What else can a grieving mother do? It changes you. Forever."